Anthony Mangnall.
I am surprised listening to this debate about the fact that we are being accused of dither and delay when 13 years of Labour government never produced this bill, and it is welcome to see it. However, that is for them to discuss and to wrestle with them on their own point. I support the sentiment of this bill. However, as ever, with all pieces of legislation that pass through this place, the devil is in the detail. And I think the Minister and the Secretary of State have a bit of a trifecta on their hands. They have to reassure members in this place and in the House of Lords. They have to reassure tenants and reassure landlords, because at the moment, I'm not entirely sure we're there. And just as not all tenants are bad tenants, it's exactly the same that not all landlords are bad landlords. And we must make sure that what we are providing in the bill today, and it's in committee stage and at third reading, are there to reassure and take both tenants and landlords with them. As many have said already, it's a balancing act, ensuring that the rights of property ownership are also there with the rights of good, firm tenancies. So I just have three areas to focus my remarks on. The first is around fixed terms and the removal of fixed terms, and to follow the very brilliant speech of the Honourable Lady from Cheadle, who talked about the unforeseen consequences. Well, Mr. Deputy Speaker, perhaps I can give an example. In my constituency, which is one of the highest second homes markets and Airbnb markets in the country, under the proposals the government is having, or proposing that we have a minimum of 2 months, someone could come down, pretend as though they're going to let a house on the long-term rental market, go there for June, July and August, and then hand back the tenancy. We would completely, with this clause, obliterate the long-term rental market, because people would take the advantage of a short-term letting market to hand the property back. The disparity between the short-term let market and the long-term let market in terms of prices is unbelievably significant in South Devon. And I hope the Minister can reassure me on this point, because that is exactly what people will do. They will rent a house on the pretence that they will stay in it for a significant period of time. They will be there for the summer, and then they will give it back, because that is what this clause does in its present guise. We have to think about how we can make sure the unforeseen consequences are addressed. And unless the Minister can give me something at the moment, I deeply worry about what that long-term rental market looks like, because at the moment across South Devon, there are only 70 homes available for people to rent. We do not demonise landlords without risk. We need to incentivise people to put their houses into the long-term rental market so that they can provide that social value. This is exactly the reason that the CLA have put into a point that they think that the rural private housing sector is set to shrink, with 44% either selling or changing the usage class of their property. The second point is around court reform. I am distinctly uneasy about voting for a bill that does not come along with the enforcement and arbitration measures alongside it. We've been here before. It's all very well in this place to give a brilliant speech and clip it and put it on YouTube and say that, or Instagram or whatever it is. But if we are not addressing it with the legal mechanisms that need to be able to be used to enforce these measures, then I think we're doing a disservice to constituents. It is part of the process in this place, and it worries me that the government is suggesting that we vote blindly on a piece of legislation that does not have that enforcement mechanism with it. So, as I've said before already, we need to understand the detail, and the devil is in the detail. So could perhaps the Minister answer this, which is, what will be the timeline for the full creation of the court system or arbitration system? At what point will she expect the timeline for the expectation of judgments? So how quickly will we see those judgments come along? In terms of the wording around antisocial behaviour, can she tell me how we look to expand that, or what the actual terminology is? When we were doing an earlier bill a few years ago, we had a very vague term around the acceptable level of noise. Well, the people who had to go and enforce that were the police. If you don't have specifics in our laws, they end up being interpreted, sometimes for better, but more often for worse. Again, I ask the government to be clear about its laws, clear about its language, so that we can ensure that this is put in the right way to help both tenants and landlords. I don't feel that this is either particularly party political, or in fact that many people from across the House would disagree with these points. I think it's about the sense of good law and good legislation, of which we are all part of that system. The third point, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is around the social value of landlords. Both the Shadow Minister and indeed the Secretary of State made exactly the same point. They expressed the value in the housing mix of landlords. And we do have to remember that, because there have to be landlords out there providing houses. Without them, our housing market would be a lot worse off. So we have to also make sure that under the rights of property ownership, something that this place has protected over the years in many, many different forms, we have to also be clear about those grounds for evictions. I don't think it is controversial to ask for evictions on the basis of breach of contract or persistent late payment or damage to property. I think those are things that we have to be very clear about and what we're asking. There's no member in this House in the course of this debate, which I actually have to say has been broadly sort of cooperative and on side. I don't think anyone in this House wants to see people homeless. They don't want them to live in bad housing. But we do have to be absolutely clear about what we're asking of tenants, about what we're asking of landlords. We have to provide that reassurance. We have to ensure that we are incentivising the long-term rental market, which we, by the way, could also look at reinstituting Section 24, which is mortgage rate relief, but that's maybe a debate for another time. We have to ensure that we're not pushing houses back into the short-term lets. We have to ensure that we're creating a transparent legal system, and we have to ensure that we're looking after the value of tenants and landlords in equal measure. This framework, as I said at the very beginning, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is welcome, but unfortunately there is more work to be done.